The vastness of space was silent, but in the throne hall of the Terran Republic the silence carried weight. Rows of noblemen and officials lined the chamber, waiting for the arrival of the Archai envoys. King Alexander IV sat upon his high seat, armored in ceremonial silver and blue. His face was calm, but his eyes held a storm. He knew the Archai never gave gifts without meaning, and he doubted their intentions today. The great doors opened. 2 towering Archai guards, their skin shimmering with faint scales, entered with measured steps. Between them walked a young figure, smaller, lighter, and very different. She wore robes of pale silver, her hair like strands of white flame, and her eyes glowed faintly with violet light. She was Princess Vera of the Archai Empire. A murmur ran through the court. Some whispered at her beauty, others at her fragile appearance compared to the usual powerful Archai warriors. But most of all, they whispered at the insult. Why send a princess here across the stars as a tribute? And why one declared infertile, a word carried in the documents of exchange? The envoy bowed low before King Alexander. Great King of the Terran Republic, the envoy declared, our emperor sends you a gift of goodwill. Princess Vera, his daughter, shall live among you as a sign of trust between our peoples. The king's jaw tightened. He could hear the unspoken words. A daughter they considered useless, a symbol of rejection, was now sent as a prize to humanity. It was no alliance. It was mockery still. Alexander stood. He walked down the steps of the throne, each step echoing in the chamber. He stopped before Vera. She lifted her gaze, and for a moment their eyes locked. Her expression was calm, though sadness lingered beneath it. She did not bow. She did not plead. She simply stood, waiting for his judgment. You are welcome in this court, Alexander said finally, his voice firm. What is given to humanity will be respected. The court was surprised. Some expected him to reject her, to send her back in anger. But Alexander was a careful man. He would not let the Archai see his fury so easily. He gestured, and servants led Vera away to prepare her chambers. That night, Alexander stood at the balcony of the palace, overlooking the capital city. Lights glittered across the skyline, and ships moved between the towers like fireflies. He clenched his hands on the railing. An infertile princess, he muttered to himself. A discarded child sent here as a message. Do they think so little of us? His advisor, Lord Heron, approached. Sire, the people see this as an insult. Already the nobles are speaking of it in private halls. I know, Alexander replied, but she is still a life. She will not be shamed here. If the Archai think they can provoke me into rashness, they are mistaken. Heron frowned. Then what shall be done with her? Alexander did not answer immediately. He looked once more at the stars. We will see who she is. The Emperor may have cast her aside, but perhaps they have overlooked something. Meanwhile, Vera sat quietly in her new chambers. The room was warm, filled with human furnishings, yet everything felt strange. The air was thicker, the gravity heavier. She touched the smooth wooden table, wondering why humans built with such materials when metal was stronger. Her thoughts drifted to her father, Emperor Kyle. She remembered his cold decree. You will go to the humans. You are unfit for our bloodline. Perhaps they will find use for you. She closed her eyes. She had been trained to keep her expression calm, her posture perfect, but inside she felt the weight of exile. She had been taken from her home not because of choice, but because she was unwanted. And yet, when she had met the human king, she noticed something. His eyes did not hold the same disdain as her father's. There was suspicion, yes. Anger, perhaps, but not hatred. For the first time in many years, she felt seen not as a failure, but as a mystery. Days passed. Vera began to walk the palace grounds. At first, guards and courtiers kept their distance. She was watched but not welcomed. Yet she did not hide. She studied the gardens, asked questions about human customs, and even listened to the scholars who lectured on Terran history. One afternoon, Alexander found her in the royal library. She was seated at a long table surrounded by thick books. She was struggling to pronounce human words aloud, repeating them softly to herself. You learn our tongue quickly, Alexander said as he entered. She looked up, startled, but did not flinch. Your words are simpler than ours. Your people speak directly. He smiled faintly. Some would call that a weakness. We are not as poetic as the Archai. Not weakness, Vera said slowly. Clarity. Truth without layers. Alexander studied her. She was different from what he expected. He had thought she would be proud, perhaps bitter. Instead, she was thoughtful, curious, and quietly strong. "Tell me, Princess," he asked, "did you want to come here?" Her eyes lowered. "Want is not for me. I was told to come. So I came. And what do you think of humanity so far?" She tilted her head. "You build with wood when metal is stronger. You laugh loudly when silence could be easier. You question rulers when obedience would be faster. But you live with spirit. There is brightness here." Alexander was silent for a moment. Then he said, "The Archi sent you as a slight, but I do not see you that way. You are welcome here, Vera." For the first time, she gave a small smile. "Thank you." As weeks went by, Vera's presence began to shift the mood of the court. She attended councils not as a speaker, but as an observer. Yet when Alexander occasionally asked her opinion, her insights surprised everyone. She noticed patterns in trade routes, weaknesses in border defenses, and opportunities in diplomacy that even seasoned advisors overlooked. Whispers spread through the palace. Some said she was more dangerous than she appeared. Others wondered if humanity had been given not a burden, but a hidden treasure. One evening, Heron approached Alexander again. "Sire, she is clever. Too clever. Some fear she may be a spy." Alexander shook his head. "No. If the Archive valued her mind, they would not have sent her away. They misjudged her as they misjudged us." "I intend to learn more," Heron sighed. "Then be cautious, Majesty. A gift from an enemy is never without risk." But the risk was already unfolding in ways no one could predict. Late one night, Vera sat alone on the balcony of her chamber. She gazed at the stars, the same stars she had seen from her homeworld. She felt a strange energy stirring inside her, something she had never felt before. It was as if the air of this planet awakened parts of her long thought dormant. Her hands trembled slightly. She pressed them against her chest, steadying her breath. She whispered in her own tongue words of wonder and fear. "What is happening to me?" She did not know that her destiny was already changing, that her presence among humans would shake two empires, and that the infertile princess would soon carry a secret neither her people nor humanity could have imagined. And so, the first chapter of their story closed not with certainty, but with the quiet beginning of a bond between a human king and an alien princess, a bond that would soon test the fate of worlds. The palace of the Terran Republic was a place of order and ceremony. Courtiers walked with dignity, guards moved in steady rhythm, and voices in the council halls spoke of treaties, trade, and borders. Yet beneath the surface, unease lingered. The presence of Princess Vera was still the subject of whispers. Some said she was nothing more than an unwanted gift, a symbol of insult from the Archi Empire. Others began to wonder if she carried a hidden purpose. Few knew what to make of her, and fewer still dared to approach her directly. But King Alexander did not keep his distance. He found himself drawn to the princess, not by her appearance but by the sharpness of her mind. She was quiet but observant. She rarely spoke, but when she did, her words carried weight. He noticed how she studied the maps of the galaxy, how her eyes lingered on human inventions, and how she often asked questions no one else thought to ask. One afternoon, Alexander entered the library once again and saw Vera seated by the tall windows. She had spread scrolls and books across the table, mixing human text with her own Archi writings. "What are you working on?" he asked. She looked up calmly. "Your star charts, they are precise but not complete. Archi records cover different routes. I am comparing them." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Our scholars have studied those routes for years. Do you believe you can find something they missed?" Vera did not boast. She simply turned the chart toward him. "Here, a cluster of trade paths. Your ships travel the long way around, but there is a corridor here. Empty, stable, faster. The Archi avoid it because of superstition, not danger. You could shorten journeys by weeks." Alexander leaned closer, studying the markings. He realized she was right. He felt a stir of surprise and respect. "You see what others do not," he said quietly. Vera lowered her gaze. "I see because I am not blinded by old habits. To my people, tradition is stronger than truth. To your people, curiosity is stronger than tradition. That is why I find your ways." "Interesting." Her words stayed with him long after he left the library. As the weeks turned into months, a strange rhythm grew between them. Alexander invited her to councils not as a speaker, but as an observer. She listened silently at first, but when asked, she gave insights that startled his advisors. During one council, they discussed unrest in the border colonies. Lord Heron suggested tightening military presence. Others proposed heavier taxation to fund more patrols. Alexander turned to Vera. "What do you see?" She spoke softly, but her words carried through the hall. "The colonies are restless not because of lack of guards, but because they feel unheard. Tax them more and you will crush their loyalty. Guard them more and you will remind them of chains. But if you give them a voice in this hall, their anger may turn into loyalty stronger than fear." The nobles shifted uncomfortably. Some frowned at the thought of giving colonists more power, but Alexander's eyes brightened. "You speak of unity, not force," he said. "Yes," Vera replied. "Your people are not like mine. You grow stronger by sharing, not by hoarding." That day, Alexander ordered a new system of councils that included representatives from the colonies. Months later, when reports showed that unrest had cooled, many began to see Vera not as an insult, but as a silent ally to their king. Despite her growing influence, Vera kept her distance from most of the court. She walked the gardens alone, studied in silence, and spent her nights gazing at the stars. Yet Alexander often found his steps leading to her side. One evening he joined her in the gardens. The moonlight painted the paths silver and the trees swayed gently in the wind. "You always look at the sky," Alexander said. Vera's violet eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. "The stars remind me of home. Yet they are the same stars you see. It makes me wonder if home is the sky itself, not the ground we stand on." Alexander smiled faintly. "A thought both poetic and wise." She glanced at him. "Humans speak directly, but sometimes your king speaks like an archive poet." He laughed quietly, the sound echoing in the still night. It was rare for him to laugh so openly, and rarer still for Vera to make light words. For a brief moment, the weight of their worlds seemed distant, but not everyone was pleased with the bond forming between them. Whispers grew sharper in the halls. Nobles questioned the king's judgment. Some feared he was too trusting of an alien princess. Others envied the attention she received. One night, Heron confronted Alexander. "Sire, you must see what this looks like. The court believes you are charmed by her. They fear she may sway your rule." Alexander's voice hardened. "If wisdom sways me, then let it. She has given counsel worth more than many who sit in this hall." Heron hesitated. "But can you trust her? She is still Archai." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "The Archai may have sent her as an insult, but that does not make her the insult. I judge her by her deeds, not her blood." Meanwhile, Vera faced her own doubts. She had been raised to believe she was unworthy, cast aside because her body could not carry the future of her people. Yet here, in this strange human palace, she found herself respected, not as a daughter of an emperor, but as a mind of her own. Late at night, she sat by her window, whispering to herself in her native tongue. "Why do they listen to me? Why does he look at me as if I am not broken?" She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling that same strange energy stirring again. It had grown stronger since her arrival on the Terran world, though she did not understand why. It was not sickness, but it was not familiar either. It was change, silent and powerful. One day, during a festival in the capital, Alexander invited Vera to join the celebration. The streets were alive with music, lanterns, and laughter. Children ran with glowing ribbons, merchants offered sweets, and fireworks painted the sky. Vera walked among the people, her silver robe shining in the lantern light. At first, the crowd watched her with caution, but when a small child approached and offered her a flower, she knelt and accepted it with a gentle smile. The child laughed, and soon others came forward, curious and unafraid. Alexander watched from nearby. For the first time, he saw how the people themselves began to accept her, not by decree but by their own choice. Later that night, as they returned to the palace, Vera spoke softly. "Your people are different from mine. They do not wait for command to give kindness." Alexander looked at her. "And what of you? Do you feel kindness here?" Vera paused. Then with quiet honesty she said, "Yes, but the galaxy was not blind to what was happening." News traveled fast. Across the stars, rumors spread of the bond between the human king and the Archai princess. Some spoke of alliance, others of scandal. When whispers reached the ears of Emperor Kale, he grew restless. "How can this be?" he said to his advisors. "The daughter I cast away now walking beside a human king? Do they mock me? Do they think she matters?" Though he showed only anger, beneath it was unease. If Vera found worth among humans, it meant his judgment had been wrong. And an emperor who was wrong could lose not just pride but power. Back on the Terran homeworld, the bond between Alexander and Vera deepened in ways neither fully understood. One evening they stood again in the gardens, watching the stars. "Tell me, Vera," Alexander said, "do you regret being sent here?" She thought for a long moment. "At first, yes. I believed it was exile. But now I'm not sure. I feel something here that I never felt in my father's halls." "I feel alive," Alexander nodded slowly. "Then perhaps the Archive made a mistake. They gave us a gift they did not value." Her violet eyes met his. For the first time there was no sadness in them, only quiet strength. "Then I will not waste what has been given." Yet beneath the surface of trust and newfound warmth, destiny was moving. The strange energy within Vera grew stronger each day. She did not yet know what it meant, nor what storm it would bring, and so, as the stars shone above, the bond between human king and alien princess grew, not as rulers of rival empires, but as two souls who had found in each other what both had long been denied: respect and the beginning of hope. But whispers of an heir were not far away. The palace had grown used to the sight of Princess Vera. Where once the halls echoed with whispers of insult and suspicion, now they carried a quieter tone, one of curiosity. The alien princess, once dismissed as unwanted, had become a quiet but steady presence at the side of King Alexander. And yet, beneath the calm surface, a storm was forming. It began on a quiet evening. The council had ended and the halls were emptying. Vera had excused herself early, claiming she felt tired. Alexander thought little of it, believing the endless discussions had simply worn her down. But when hours passed and she did not appear for dinner, worry stirred in his chest. He went to her chambers himself. The guards at her door bowed, uncertain whether to speak. Alexander pushed past them and entered. Vera was seated on the floor, her back against the wall, her breath unsteady. Her hands were pressed to her stomach, her pale skin damp with sweat. "Vera!" Alexander rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. Her violet eyes flickered with alarm. "Do not call the physicians," she whispered. "Not yet. You are unwell," he said firmly. "You need help." She shook her head, trembling. This is not sickness. It feels different." But Alexander ignored her protest and called for the palace healers. Within moments, Terran physicians entered, carrying instruments and scanners. They worked quickly, their faces shifting from confusion to shock. At last, the chief physician stepped forward, pale with disbelief. "Your Majesty, she is with child." The words hung in the air like thunder. Alexander stared at the man, then at Vera, unable to speak at first. "That is impossible," Vera whispered, her voice trembling. "My body, it cannot—" The physician bowed low, his voice still shaken. "And yet, Princess, it is true. The readings are clear. You are carrying life." The news spread through the palace faster than fire. By dawn, every noble and servant whispered the same phrase: "The princess is with child." Some reacted with joy, others with fear. The nobles gathered in secret chambers, debating the meaning. "If it is true," one said, "then the king has an heir." "Not just an heir," another whispered, "an heir of human and Archive blood. A symbol of unity, or a reason for war." The palace was alive with speculation. Some called it a miracle, others a danger. And yet at the center of it all, Alexander and Vera faced the truth together. In her chambers, Vera sat by the window, her hands trembling as she touched her stomach. She felt the faint rhythm of new life, something she had been told she could never know. Alexander stood nearby, his face shadowed with thought. "Do you believe this?" he asked quietly. Vera's eyes glistened. "All my life they said I was broken. They said my body would never give life. That was why I was sent away. And now—" Her voice broke, and for the first time since her arrival, tears traced down her cheeks. "Now I carry the future." Alexander knelt before her, taking her hand gently. "Not broken," he said firmly. "Never broken. They cast you aside because they did not see your worth. But I see it, and now the galaxy will see it too." But the galaxy was already watching. Within weeks, the news reached the Archive Empire. Whispers flew through markets, barracks, and palaces. Some called it betrayal. Others called it a miracle. But when the news reached Emperor Kale himself, his fury was unmatched. "My daughter," he roared, his voice shaking the throne chamber. "The one I declared barren, now carrying life with a human? This is insult beyond measure." His generals bowed uneasy. The people are restless, Majesty. Many see it as a sign. They say perhaps you were wrong to cast her aside. Kyle's face darkened. To be wrong was worse than insult, it was weakness. And weakness was something an emperor could never show. Send word to the Terran king, he commanded. The princess must be returned at once. That child belongs to the Archi, not to humanity. Back on the Terran homeworld, Alexander's court grew tense. His advisors pressed him with questions. Majesty, the Empire demands her return, Lord Heron said urgently. If you refuse, we risk war. Alexander's voice was steady. She came to us as a gift. Now she is under my protection, and the child she carries is mine to defend. The nobles exchanged nervous glances. Some feared the strength of the Archi fleet. Others feared rebellion within their own ranks. But Alexander's gaze was unwavering. He would not bend. For Vera, the days became a mixture of wonder and fear. She felt the life within her grow stronger each day. Yet she also felt the weight of eyes watching her, judging her. Some nobles greeted her kindly now, bowing with respect. Others avoided her, whispering behind her back. One night she walked alone in the palace gardens. The stars shimmered above, silent witnesses to her turmoil. She whispered to herself, am I hope? Or am I danger? Alexander found her there, standing among the trees. You are both, he said quietly. She turned, startled, but his eyes were kind. Hope for us. Danger for those who fear change. But never fear yourself, Vera. You are not the cause of war, you are the cause of something new. Her eyes softened. And if war comes, then I will stand against it, Alexander replied. For you, for our child, for the future we are building. But war was already close. The Archi fleets began to move near the border. Scouts reported heavy patrols, ships gathering in formations not seen since the last great conflict. The Terran Republic prepared in turn. Fleets were armed, colonies fortified, soldiers drilled. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the first spark to ignite. And through it all, Vera's presence became both shield and sword. To many Terrans, she was the symbol of courage, a living proof that humanity could not only endure but inspire change. To the Archi, she was the reminder of their emperor's failure. As tension mounted, messages flew between the two empires. The Archi demanded Vera's return again and again. Alexander's response was always the same: refusal. At last, Kale sent a final message, his voice cold and sharp. If you do not return my daughter, the child will never see peace. You risk the wrath of the Archi Empire, Alexander answered with steel in his tone. Then let the galaxy witness your wrath and let it witness ours. She is not your possession. She is under my protection, and the child is the heir of humanity. The palace trembled with the weight of what was coming. Some feared the king's defiance would bring ruin. Others whispered that this was the moment humanity had been waiting for, the chance to stand equal to the great empires of the stars. In her chambers, Vera sat quietly, hands resting on her stomach. She felt the gentle pulse of life within her. For the first time, she did not feel broken or discarded. She felt whole. She felt strong, and in that moment she knew. Whatever storm was coming, she would face it not as an exile, but as a mother, a princess, and perhaps even something greater, a bridge between worlds. Thus the whispers spread across the galaxy. The infertile princess carries an heir. Some whispered of hope, others of war, but all agreed on one truth: nothing would ever be the same again. The galaxy was restless. For weeks, ships had moved along the border between the Terran Republic and the Archi Empire. Colonists reported the sight of war fleets gathering in the skies. Merchant vessels were stopped and searched. Patrols clashed in small skirmishes, not yet battles, but dangerous sparks. And at the center of it all was a single truth: Princess Vera, once cast aside, now carried an heir. In the golden halls of the Archi capital, Emperor Kyle's rage echoed like thunder. He stood tall upon his throne, his cloak of scales shimmering like storm clouds. Around him knelt his generals and advisors, careful not to meet his blazing eyes. My daughter, he roared, my blood, my flesh, sent away because she was unfit, and now the humans claim she carries an heir? They mock me. They mock the Empire. The hall shook with his voice. Some generals trembled, others bowed their heads in silence. No one dared to speak. Finally, one old commander lifted his voice. Majesty, the people whisper. Some say perhaps the princess was not unfit after all. Some say Perhaps your judgment was wrong. Kale's eyes narrowed dangerously. To question him was death, yet he could not ignore it. He knew the whispers were true. Across his empire, citizens spoke in hushed tones. If the princess can bear life with a human, then perhaps the emperor is not infallible. The thought cut deeper than any sword. Kale's hand gripped the arm of his throne. She is mine. She is HFY, and that child she carries belongs to the Empire. The humans will return her, or they will burn. Far away in the shining capital of the Terran Republic, King Alexander faced his own storm. His council chamber was filled with heated voices. Nobles, generals, and advisors all argued at once. They demand her return, Majesty. Lord Heron cried. If we refuse, they will attack. Then let them attack, Alexander said coldly. The chamber fell silent at his words. His eyes blazed with the same fire that had carried humanity through centuries of struggle. She came to us as a gift, he continued. Not a slave, not a prisoner, a gift. And we accepted her with honor. Now she is under our protection. To return her would not only be betrayal of her, but of ourselves. But sire, another noble protested, this child, what if it brings danger? What if the HFY never forgive? Alexander slammed his hand upon the table. This child is hope. A sign that our blood and theirs can meet, not in war, but in unity. If they fear it, let them fear. I will not hand over my heir. Vera sat in her chambers, listening to the distant echoes of the debates. Her hands rested on her stomach, feeling the quiet life within her. She could not block the voices that reached her from beyond the door. War, heir, return, threat. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself. What am I? Am I peace or am I the spark of war? A knock at the door broke her thoughts. Alexander entered, his face still set with the hard lines of command. Yet when he looked at her, his expression softened. You heard? He said. I hear everything, Vera answered quietly. They argue about me, about the child. They argue about war. Alexander moved closer, kneeling beside her seat. Listen to me, Vera, none of this is your fault. You are not the cause of war. The cause is their fear. She looked at him with searching eyes. And if their fear becomes fire? If thousands die because of me? Alexander's hand touched hers gently. Then I will carry that burden, not you. You have given me something no emperor, no noble, no council ever could. Hope for tomorrow. For that, I will not let them take you. For the first time in days, Vera's trembling eased. She looked at him not as a king, but as a man who had chosen to protect her, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, in the border systems, tension reached its peak. The Terran fleets, sleek and silver, formed in defensive lines. The HFY armadas, dark and vast, loomed across the void. Captains on both sides waited for the single word that would unleash war. Messages passed between leaders. But each word only sharpened the blades. Kale's final demand came in the form of a broadcast sent across both empires. Return my daughter, and the child she carries, or face the wrath of the HFY Empire. If you refuse, every star between us will burn. The message reached every Terran world. Citizens gathered in streets and halls to hear their king's reply. Alexander stood before the cameras, his voice calm but firm. Humanity does not bow to threats. Princess Vera is not a prisoner. She chose to stand with us, and we will protect her. The child she carries is not the property of any empire. It is life. It is the future. And humanity will defend that future with everything we are. Across the stars, Terran citizens cheered. Across the empire, HFY citizens listened in silence, some angry, some doubtful, and some quietly inspired. But not all was certain within the palace. Some nobles began to question the king's resolve. Fearful of war, they met in secret chambers, whispering of alternatives. If he will not return her, perhaps we should, one muttered. Better to sacrifice one than to risk the destruction of all. But none dared act openly. Alexander's support among the people had grown too strong. Vera herself had become a symbol, not of weakness but of courage. One night, as the stars burned silently above, Vera stood on her balcony, lost in thought. She could feel the child within her stronger now, a steady presence that reminded her she was not alone. She whispered softly, I was called barren, unfit, broken, but now I carry more than life. I carry the weight of two worlds. Alexander joined her, standing beside her in the cool night air. And you carry it with more strength than anyone I have ever known." She turned to him, her voice low but steady. "I am afraid, Alexander, not for myself but for what is coming. I do not want blood spilled for me." He placed his hand gently over hers. "Blood may be spilled, but not because of you. Because of their pride, their fear, their refusal to change. But if we endure, if we stand together, then your child will be born into a world that is stronger than before." Her violet eyes met his, and for the first time she allowed herself to believe his words. In the Archi capital, Emperor Kale prepared his fleets for war. But in the shadows of his empire, unrest grew. Citizens began to question not only his judgment but his rule. If the discarded princess could bear life with humans, what else had the emperor lied about? Some whispered that Vera was not a shame but a sign of destiny. Others secretly hoped that she might become more than a lost daughter, that she might change the empire itself. Kale heard these whispers and burned with fury. To him it was betrayal. To his people it was the beginning of doubt. And so the galaxy balanced on the edge of a blade. One move, one spark, would decide if the stars would see peace or endless war. Vera lay awake at night, her hand resting gently on her stomach. She felt the faint rhythm of the child within her and whispered a vow. "I will not let you be born into chains. You will not be a tool for pride or for war. You will be a symbol of something greater." Her words carried softly into the silence, but the stars seemed to listen. Thus, the stage was set. A furious emperor, unwilling to admit fault, a determined king unwilling to surrender hope, and a princess who had been cast aside now standing at the center of destiny. The next choice would not belong to generals or fleets. It would belong to Vera herself. The galaxy was waiting. Ships floated like silent wolves along the border of the Terran Republic and the Archi Empire. Citizens of both peoples held their breath, not knowing if the next sunrise would bring peace or fire. Messages of anger, fear, and hope crossed the stars, all tied to one woman, Princess Vera. She was no longer seen as a discarded daughter. She was the symbol of something larger, something that frightened kings and inspired common hearts. And now the moment had come for her to choose her voice. In the grand palace of the Terran Republic, the council chamber was filled. Nobles, commanders, scholars, and messengers crowded the hall. King Alexander sat upon his throne, his face calm but his eyes sharp. Beside him, Vera stood tall, her silver robes glowing in the light. A messenger stepped forward holding a sealed record. "Majesty," he said, bowing, "another demand from the Archi Emperor." "Read it," Alexander commanded. The messenger's voice trembled as he spoke. "Return the princess and her unborn child. Return them at once or face destruction. This is the last command of Emperor Kale." The hall erupted with noise. Some nobles shouted for war, others cried for surrender. The air shook with fear and anger, but then Vera lifted her hand. Silence fell. Her voice was calm, but every word carried through the hall. "I will answer him. Not as a gift, not as an exile, but as myself." That evening a broadcast was prepared. For the first time, Vera would speak not only to the Terran Republic, but to the entire galaxy. She stood before the cameras, her heart steady, her hands folded before her stomach. Behind her, Alexander remained silent, a presence of strength. "My name is Vera," she began. Her voice was clear, soft, but strong. "I was born a princess of the Archi Empire. From my first breath I was told I was unworthy. I was told my body was broken, that I could never carry life. For that I was cast aside, given away as though I was nothing." Her eyes burned with quiet fire. "But here, among humans, I found something my father never gave me: respect, choice, hope. And now, against all expectations, I carry life, a child who is not Archi, not Terran, but both." Her hands rested on her stomach. "This child is not a weapon. This child is not a prize to be claimed. This child is a bridge, a beginning, proof that we are not so different as we were taught to believe." She lifted her chin, her voice stronger. "I do not belong to an emperor who cast me aside. I belong to no throne but the one I choose. And I choose humanity. I choose the Terran Republic. I choose a future where our children will not be divided by blood but united by hope." Her words spread across the stars, to every colony, every ship, every marketplace, and in that moment, something shifted. In the Archi capital, citizens crowded around screens, listening to the voice of the princess they had once believed forgotten. Many wept, others cheered. For years they had lived under the heavy hand of tradition, told to believe that bloodlines could not change. But here was proof alive and undeniable. The streets filled with chants. Vera! Vera, a new dawn. Emperor Kale stood in his throne hall, his face pale with rage. His generals whispered uneasily, for they could hear the chants even within the palace walls. Majesty, one finally said, the people no longer follow your words. They listen to hers. Kyle's hands trembled as he gripped the arm of his throne. She was meant to be nothing, he hissed. And now she makes me appear weak. But he knew the truth. If he moved against her now, it would not only be war with humans, but rebellion within his own empire. For the first time in his reign, Kale remained silent. Back in the Terran capital, the broadcast ended, but the cheers outside the palace shook the city. Citizens sang her name. They called the unborn child the Star Heir. Alexander looked at Vera with quiet pride. You have done what no army could do. You changed the hearts of two peoples with words. Vera exhaled, her hands trembling only now that the moment was over. I only spoke the truth. And the truth, Alexander said softly, is the most powerful weapon of all. The days that followed were tense, but no attack came. The archive fleets, once poised for war, slowly withdrew. Reports arrived from across the empire. Protests, songs, and banners declaring loyalty not to the emperor, but to the princess. Emperor Kale could not risk full war. Not when his own throne shook beneath him. He pulled back his fleets, announcing that peace would remain, though his silence was louder than any words. The Terran Republic celebrated. The threat of destruction had passed, and instead of ashes, the people were left with hope. As months passed, the palace grew quieter. War had not come, but something else did. Closer, smaller, yet far more powerful. The day of birth. Vera lay within her chambers, surrounded by Terran physicians. Outside, the city waited, holding its breath. Alexander paced the hall, his face pale with worry. He had faced fleets, emperors, and death without fear. But this, waiting for the moment when his child would enter the world, was a trial unlike any other. At last, a cry filled the room. Not of sorrow, but of new life. A physician stepped forward, carrying the child wrapped in soft cloth. His voice was steady, but his eyes shone. Majesty, Princess, the child is healthy. Vera took the small bundle into her arms, her eyes wet with tears. She looked down at the tiny face, the quiet breath, the fragile but certain life. Alexander leaned close, his hand trembling as he touched the child's head. For a moment, words failed him. Finally, he whispered, Our heir, our future. News spread like wildfire. Bells rang in every Terran city. Lights filled the skies. Across the stars, messages flew. The heir is born, and not just a Terran heir, but the first child of two worlds. In the streets of the Archai Empire, citizens rejoiced as if it were their own. The chants grew louder. Vera lives. The heir lives. A new legacy begins. Even Kale, alone in his throne room, could not silence the truth. His empire had changed forever. Weeks later, Vera stood on the balcony of the palace, the child in her arms. Alexander stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Before them stretched the capital, filled with countless citizens cheering, singing, and waving banners of both human and alien design. Vera lifted the child for all to see. Her voice carried, not only through the city, but across the galaxy as the moment was broadcast. This is not only my child, she said. This is our child. A child of two worlds. A child of peace. A child who proves that what divides us is smaller than what unites us. The cheers shook the skies, and so the world changed. The years ahead would not be easy. There would still be fear, still be anger, still be those who clung to the old ways. But the birth of the Star Heir had planted something no army could destroy. Hope. That night, as the city celebrated, Alexander and Vera sat quietly in their chambers. The child slept between them, small and peaceful. Alexander looked at Vera, his voice soft. We have faced emperors and war, but now we face something greater, raising a life who will inherit this future. Vera smiled gently. Then we will raise the child not as a weapon, not as a symbol, but as a person who knows both strength and kindness. They sat together in the silence, the stars shining above, and in that moment, it was clear. The legacy of humanity and the Archai had changed forever. Not by battle, not by conquest, but by the courage of one princess, a defiant king, and the life they brought into the galaxy. Thus the tale closed not with fire, but with light. The infertile princess was no longer broken. The human king was no longer mocked. And the heir, born of two peoples, was the promise that even in the endless night of space, hope could still shine. A new legacy had begun.